Okay, welcome to the official Game Creator Molio presentation, where we'll overview, basically the Melee module. Hope that's how you pronounce it. I have a few notes here on how we'll go. I divided this presentation in different sections. I just have one computer, so I can check both the chat and my screen at the same time. So after each section, I'll try to see the chat like this and see if there are any questions, and I'll resolve them there. There's a bit of delay, so pardon me if I just skip your question. I'll try to answer it after that. Okay. So, what we'll do? We'll first play a bit with the current scene. Oh, it's working fine. Perfect. If there is any problem with the audio or something, just send me a message here. A bit weak sound here. Okay. I don't know if I can bump it. I'll try keeping this microphone closer. Anyway, I was saying we'll play a bit with the current scene. Then we'll overview all the triggers here and how the player works, how the enemy works. Then we'll jump into the assets in the project. So that is the weapon asset, the shield asset, and how the different animations are configured. And at the end of the presentation, we'll just try to use a different animation included into the current combat system, and we'll see how awesome and fun it is to expand the Melee module. So without further ado, and if there are no questions, yeah, everything sounds fine. Okay, so let's jump right in. So here I have a couple of scenes. I have this one, and I have my player here, and he has a sword that I can block in, and I can draw it. I can, with my middle mouse, I can focus on the enemy. This enemy is focusing at me, and at the moment he is not attacking. I can left click, and he will do attack, or I can left click multiple times, and he will do different attacks. I can hold the right click, and I can block his attacks. Of course, he's not blocking attacks because he's not doing anything, and I can attack him. There are multiple attacks here. This is the basic combo, just 3 hits, and this is a knockback. We'll explain later what that is. There are also some special some special attacks. For example, if I'm holding forward and press attack, it launches like this. I can do the same with holding backwards, for example, like this. And doing this special attack automatically knocks back the enemy. Okay, so having this in mind, let's go to the other scene, which is a bit more exciting because the enemy can also attack me. So I'm not very good with these games. Okay, let's see. How can I block the attacks? Okay, like this. Okay, notice how there's here a defense meter and the poise meter. These are very important, and I'll explain them what they are in a second. Let me just first counter attack his attack like this. This is a counter attack, and it's just at the moment the enemy tries to attack me, I press the block, and it creates a perfect block, and I can follow up with another attack, which is a special kind of attack. We'll see how to create all these attacks later in the video. Okay, let me pause here a second and take a look at the chat. Let's see. Okay, why is the anime sliding? The sliding, I hope you mean the when he's walking. That's because the animations are not mine, or at least the locomotion ones. These have been picked up from the asset store. It's called, I think it's Sword Animation Pro. It's from Cobalt. This won't be included with the game creator, of course. I have my own set of animations, but I thought that I'm no animator, so my animations are much simpler. And for this demonstration purpose, I thought of using much more polished animations. So this lighting is because the animations have a slight distance between the feet and the floor. You can correct that, but I had to spend like 30 minutes and I was short on time. So moving on, I want to explain what the poise and defense are. I've already explained this in Twitter, but we'll go over this here. So let me pause this. There is the defense and the poise. Defense is when you're blocking, you block incoming attacks, unless these attacks are marked as unblockable. In that case, they will just hit you, but you can block all attacks. The problem is that if you hold the defense indefinitely, you could block all the attacks and the game wouldn't be very fun. So this defense regenerates over time, but each time you get attacked, it decreases the amount of defense you have. Once it reaches 0, you are exposed to other attacks. That's a way I thought about building this system. You can always turn this off, but I thought it was pretty cool. Poise works very similarly, but when you get hit. Let me show you this. Well, first let's show the defense. So I have full defense now, and if I hold the defense button, you see that it decreases. When it reaches 0, I get hit. And as you saw, the poise meter also reached 0, and I got knocked back. That's what the poise does. So as long as you have poise, if you get hit, you will get hit, but you will stay in place. Once your poise reaches 0, you will get knocked back, which is supposed to trigger an animation that creates some distance between you and the enemy, so that you can stand up, recover, and go back into the fight, so you don't get stun locked. These recovery rates, the amount of defense, and how each attack reduces both defense and poise can be completely configured, and we'll see later on how to do that. Okay, let me quickly check the chat. Okay, thank you. Okay, everything looks fine. So we will move into... Oh, yeah, sure. I have my notes here. I forgot to show a couple of things. One is dashing. So when we're fighting, I can block attacks, but I can also dash attacks like this. And I have some invincibility frames like this. Also, the attacks, and this is better shown here. Attacks in the melee module have what it's called input buffer. So when you attack, if you attack while you are attacking, this command of attacking gets queued and it's executed as soon as you finish your previous attack. So this is how most games work, and it just looks much more fluid. It's imperceptible to the user, but it gives the impression of the combat is much more smooth and polished. Otherwise, you would get tied to your how fast you press the attack button. This is done automatically for you, and the input buffer is there just for free, so you don't have to worry about it. Okay, now moving to the scene overview here with the enemy. We'll see first how the player is configured. Both player and enemies need to have a special component, let me close this, called the character melee. I still have to make the layout of this component more similar to these ones, but I didn't have enough time and I didn't want to touch anything before the 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 live stream, so I didn't have any nasty surprises. Here you can define the maximum poise, the recovery rate of the poise, and the delay of the poise. Delay poise is when you get hit, how much time has to pass before your poise starts recovering. This is just so your recovery rate doesn't exceed the amount that is subtracted from the enemy when hitting you, or you hitting the enemy. Does this work with behavior? Yes, in fact, most of the settings from the melee module have been implemented so that they work best with the behavior module. So for example, when you create an AI for the enemy, you can tell the enemy, okay, we'll see that in a second. You can spam the attack command, and it will just attack the frames that the enemy can attack. So for example, if an enemy is stun locked or something like that, and the AI tries to make the enemy attack, because the enemy is staggered, the enemy won't be able to attack. So it's like the enemy or enemies are some kind of player that react to the input. Works on first-person camera. Yes, it's not shown here because you just need different kinds of animation, so they work with first person, but the workflow is exactly the same. And about the rifts, I don't know what rifts are, but rolls, it's just the same animation, or it's the same system with a different animation. So you can do skips, rifts, evades, whatever you call it. So getting back into business, we have this component, and this component is in charge of managing both the player as a melee character, and the enemy also has this character melee component. For the player, we have this, let me see here, this trigger, very simple. It just detects when I press the key O. I chose this key, don't know why, it just made sense, and executes these conditions from here. Basically, these conditions ask if the player has a weapon in his hand, sheath the weapon, otherwise draw the weapon. So it just toggles the weapon in his hand or in his sheath. The attack trigger, it's just a trigger that it's set up with the left mouse button, and when the left mouse button is clicked, it executes this action from here, which basically tells, hey, execute the character with the key A. And the key, this is a concept that I wasn't sure if I had to implement, but it made sense. So if you're designing a game for both PlayStation 4, PC, mobile, or Xbox all together, each input has to be tied to the controller you're going to use. So instead of allowing you to choose a keyboard or keyboard input here, will allow you to choose one of these keys. These keys are exclusively used with the melee module. So then you say, okay, if I press the mouse button the left mouse button from the mouse, execute the key, the input system A. If I were to use this system with the PlayStation 4 controller, I would map, for example, the square button to execute the A here also. So it's more like a flexible system that can be used with multiple controllers. Hope this makes sense. Let me just quickly see the chat. Can you create fighting styles like Gundam Mamo and Shoot module? Yes, you can create different combat styles. We'll see in a second how the combo system works, and it's super fun and super easy to use. A bit complex, but with a bit of practice you can create a lot of things. And throwing weapons. Throwing weapons is more tied to the shooter model than the melee module. Although you can throw daggers, and daggers seem to be more related with the melee. It's more it should be done with the melee module. I'm sorry, the shooter module, but both can be used together, so there's no problem here. Going back here, to make the player block attacks, it's very similar to the attack. You create two triggers, one here and one here. When you hold the right mouse button down, you use the action on the player that tells him, okay, start blocking. When you release the button, you use this action, which is called stop blocking. Very easy. And for the target is acquired using the middle mouse from the button, and when it's pressed, this is the trigger, it calls these conditions from here. So it asks, okay, if the player has something focused, it releases the target. It's focusing at the moment. If not, it sets the player's target as the enemy. This is a very straightforward approach. In a real game, you would probably want to use a list variables where you have all your enemies there and you pick the one that's closest to the player. But for demonstration purposes, I wanted to keep this simple. And that's it. That's the player. There's nothing more complex than this in terms of logic. Then we'll see how to create weapons, how to create the combat system, and how to do all these things. As for the enemy, which is a bit more complex but not that much, it's with this one from here. It's a trigger that starts, it's executed on start and calls two actions. The first action, it's this one and just tells, okay, enemy, draw this weapon, which is a sword. We'll see what this object is later on. Then it sets as the target of the enemy the player. And this empty list of actions here is actually, it's better seeing this here, which is exactly the same, but it's filled. And as you can see, the AI of the enemy is very simple. It tells him, okay, wait 1 second, then try to attack the player. Then wait 2 seconds, then try to attack the player, then wait 1 second, attack the player, wait 0.5 seconds, attack the player, and restarts the action. This action from here puts the pointer here and starts again. As you can see, the enemy seemed quite smart, but this is how smart he is. He just waits a bit, attacks, waits a bit, attacks. With the behavior model, you can create crazy AIs, and that will work much better. But just with this simple collection of instructions, you can already make a zombie game. Let me pause here a second and see. We could create a trigger or an action that toggles the draw and sheath of the weapon. However, I'm not sure that's a good idea, because if you make the enemy, for example, check if the player is in sight, then you could use this action, but it would probably sheath the sword, not draw it. So it could make, I think it's better like this. We could create an action, for example, and make it work better. Okay, jumping to the next. So this is how it's done with the AI and all this stuff. Let's go to the weapon and shield assets. For those who are completely new to the melee weapon, the melee system, you have two assets that compose the melee system: weapons and shields. Let's first overview the weapon, which is the most complex one, let's say like this. Forget about this. Let's just focus on this part here first. The general settings, you have if you have seen the shooter module, this will sound very familiar to you. You have a weapon name, a weapon description. You can define a shield, which we'll see later on. You have a character state and a mask. This character state is the pose the character stays when drawing the weapon. So for example, if I hit play here, I can draw my weapon, and this position, this set of animations is the state of the character, which is this one from here. Moving on to the weapon model, you have the prefab, the attachment where this prefab goes, and the position and rotation offsets. This is self-explanatory. This is the object that it's going to represent the weapon. However, it requires a very specific component called the blade component that we'll see later on. I don't want to start branching off, so after we review the weapon asset, we'll see how this prefab is created, which also has its quirks. The attachment is where the instance of this object is going to be attached. For example, this is a sword, so it goes to the right hand. You can select left foot, the right foot, in case you are using some kind of boots with claws or whatever. The left arm, the left hand, right hand, or the camera. The camera is exclusively for the first person melee systems. I haven't used it yet, but it's there in case someone wants to create the next Skyrim. Moving on to effects. Effects, self-explanatory. When you draw the weapon, this audio clip is played. When you sheath your weapon, this audio clip is played. Same with impacts. When you slash with your sword and it hits something, it plays this audio clip, and if it breaks the posture of the the posture or the defense of the enemy, it will play this other animation clip. This is taken straight from Sekiro. And the same with particle effects. These are the particle effects that are played when you impact with something or you knockback something. This is the combo system. Let me quickly pause here and review the chat, because we'll have to take some time to explain this. Let's see. When can you buy it? It will take at least 15 days, because I need at least a week to write the whole documentation and then another week for the Unity Asset Store to review it. So yeah, I guess around mid-March at most, I hope. So the combo system, it's this section from here. It's a bit daunting, but it's quite easy to understand. Let me no, we'll do it from here. It's a list of different entries, and you can create more entries clicking this mouse button from here, and you can remove them clicking the minus and selecting them. Each entry is composed of 3 lines. The key that is the command that it's issued. For example, the A, you can choose B, C, D, E, and F, and there's a condition. This condition, there are a bunch of conditions you can use. I expect to add more later in the future based on your feedback, but I think that for the moment it's quite good, this one. And then accepts a melee clip. Melee clip is, we'll explain how they work and how fun they are to use, but for the moment just imagine these are animation clips. Like if you have a 3-hit combo, you have the first animation, the second animation, and the third animation. And these would be these ones: my attack 1, my attack 2, and my attack 3. Combo systems are evaluated from top to bottom. So it first starts checking this one. As soon as the character or player gets a command issued, for example, execute command A, which is this one, it starts checking the condition. If the player has made a perfect block in the last, I think it's a half a second or something like that, play this counter block. Counter block is the attack played right after blocking an attack. If this condition is not met, or this one, then it tries to evaluate the second entry, which is this one. If the player receives the attack button A and the player is trying to move forward, it will play this animation clip, which is Stinger. It's like jumping towards the enemy in order to close the gap between the player and the enemy. Same with this one. If the player is on the air, it plays this hammerfall, which the hammerfall is raising his hand with a sword and then slashing down to stomp any enemy that's below it. Same with this one, it's the backslash, it spins around and makes some funny attack. And these two are the most important, which are the basic combo system, the basic combo pack. It basically says, okay, if I execute the command A, I will play this attack. See that there is no condition. However, if while I'm playing this attack, I issue a second command with the A key, I will play this one. And if while I'm playing this one, I issue another A command, I will play this one. I will pause here and see the chat because this is a bit complicated and I want to make sure that everyone understands how this works. Okay, you get more buttons combinations. You have 6 buttons to play. I think that's more than enough. If you want more, we can definitely add more. I just thought that 6 buttons were more than enough. In a controller, for example, PlayStation 4, you have the X, square, triangle, and circle, R1 and left 1, and I think that's more than enough. But if you want more, of course, we can add more. For two-hand weapons or great swords or things like that, it's just different types of animation, so it's perfectly possible to create a spear, a hammer, a axe, whatever you want. As long as you have the animation clips, you can use the system, and it's really easy to add. We'll show how to do it at the end of the live stream, and yeah, it's actually pretty fun to do. So, if there are any questions about the combo system, just hit me a message and we can go back here and talk more about it. So, moving a bit down here, we have hit reactions. There's a lot of things, but it's really easy to understand this. So, you have, it's basically when the player or the character gets hit, it will play one of these lists. It will pick an animation from these lists from here and play it. So if the character that gets hit is grounded and the hit comes from the front, it will pick a random animation from this list from here. And there's a caveat here. If the player gets hit and plays, for example, this animation from here, the next time the player gets hit, it will play a random animation from here, but it won't play this one. So it's a random, but it's pseudo-random without consecutive animation clips, just to make things look better. Same with this one from here. If the player is grounded but the hit comes from behind, it will play this animation clip. Because there's just one, it will play always this one from here. If the player is on the air and receives an attack from the front, it will play this one, and the same if the player is on the air and gets a hit from behind. And the knockback. The knockback, remember, is the animation that if the character is has its poise depleted, it will play this animation that it's supposed to create a gap between the player and the enemy, so that it can have a moment to breathe and get back to combat. And that's basically it. That's the weapon, and we'll see now the shield, but we'll make another pause, super quick pause, to see the chat. A very good question by NECA, and it's how to unlock combos at runtime. So for example, if your character has a 3-hit combo and there's a skill tree and you want to unlock a 4th attack, that's very easy to do. This is static, so this is all your skills you will have, for example, and you create a 4th one here, you create another entry, and you would drop here another attack. So in order to control that the character can't, now that I'm thinking about it, it's not that easy. Haven't thought about that. So what I was thinking is that when you issue commands, NECA, remind me about this later on Discord, and I'll see if I can add a local variable here that you can later enable, a Boolean type, and this should be much easier to do. Yeah. Great question, by the way. Great question. So let me remove this, and yeah. Okay, moving forward. The shield asset. Shield asset is simpler than the other one, and most of the things will sound familiar, like the weapon asset. General settings, you have shield name, shield description. You probably won't need to add these ones, but here they are. The prefab and the attachment, these are completely optional. The weapon, these are required because a weapon needs blade where you can capture hits, or the hammer needs to have some surface where it can detect different hits, but the shield is completely optional. Remember that defense is driven by these properties from here, so the prefab is not used. But it's optional, so you can add this here. The effects, same as the weapon. When you block an attack, you play this audio clip. If you perfectly deflect an attack, you play this clip. Same with particle effects. And the combat. The combat has a defense state and a defend mask. You will see, I'll hit play now. Which version is this one? Okay. So if I press the blocking button, you see that the character raises his hand, trying to block incoming attacks. This is the state from here, and you can see that if I expand this, it's basically an animation that the character has his elbow higher up in the air, and here it has an avatar mask, which makes this animation just play in the upper body, so the lower body can play the locomotion animations from the weapon. You have the lower body rotation. This is inherited from the shooter module. Isn't really supposed to be here, but I just left it in case someone wanted to tilt the hips to some kind of direction. I wouldn't use them, but it's here in case anyone wants to use them. The defense angle. Defense angle, it's in front of the player. What's the angle in which he can't block incoming attacks. So if in this case it's 120 degrees, if an enemy attacks the player from behind, but the player is blocking, it will still get an attack because the incoming attack is higher. It's the angle between the forward vector between the player and the incoming attack is higher than 120 degrees. So if you want the player to block attacks from behind, from front, and from the sides, just type here 360, and it will block attacks from all sides. Perfect block window is the time between if the player presses the block attack and the enemy attack connects with the enemy, with the player, sorry, it will make a perfect block. It sounds verbose. I think it's very intuitive to understand if you've played a few games. And defense recovery rate, max defense, and delay defense are the same as the poise you saw in here. Let me see here with the poise, but with the defending system. Pretty straightforward to do so. And these are the same as the weapon clips, but for blocking. For example, if the player gets a perfect block, it will play this animation from here. If it doesn't get a perfect block but starts blocking at incoming attacks, it will play these animations from here. However, if the player attacks an enemy and this enemy perfectly blocks his attack, it will play one of these animations. Because when you hit an enemy and it perfectly blocks you, you're supposed to be surprised that he's blocking you. So these animations are the player stumbling and bouncing back from his own attack. These are what these are. So quick pause to see the chat. So, can you connect shooter module and the melee module together? Yes, you can. It won't be as straightforward as connecting the stats module, the behavior module, but both of them can work together. So, for example, you can't have daggers that you can have daggers that you can attack and throw them, but it's going to be a bit more complicated than having, for example, a sword on your right hand and a pistol on your left hand. This is super quick to do, and it's pretty much straightforward using both modules. But if you want to mix the same weapons from the shooter module as with the weapons from the melee module, then it's going to take a bit of creativity. Okay. Let's see. Weapon next. Yes, I forgot to I said we would review this prefab from here, and I did not, so let's fix this. So, to recap, the weapon asset defines how the weapon behaves, and the weapon model section here tells how this weapon is represented onto the module. So we have this prefab from here, and it's attached to the right hand with this position and these rotation offsets. But this prefab, requires a plate component that we're going to see right away. And this is required. If not, the melee system won't work, because this system is supposed to capture the hits when swinging the sword or the hammer or whatever. And the way this component registers all hits can be done using you have two options. The default one is the segment. Segment is, you have a blade here in this sword, for example, and you see there's a little yellow sphere here, and there is another one here, but it's hidden behind the model. So there's a line connecting these two dots. This is the segment or blade. Any object going through this segment is going to be considered a hit. And you can change this. By the way, this layout from here is going to change. This is just for debugging. I didn't have time to modify it. I have this version a bit modified, but I didn't want to. I had to roll it back because I didn't want any surprises in this live stream. So this will be much prettier, but the options will be exactly the same. So you have segment or sphere. Going with the segment, you can modify this tip here. You can, for example, increase this, and if it's like this, let's see, this sword will cut from here until here, which is way too exaggerated, so we go it back to 1, which is this distance from here. However, this is not very performant because each frame it will try to hit any objects that collide along this line here, and will also interpolate any because sword slashes are usually very fast, and an object could go in between these two frames. Could how is that called? That's called, I think it's called ghosting, where a bullet goes through a wall because the frame rate, the bullet was going so fast that it didn't register the collision. We solved this by creating different interframe raycasts. This is a bit expensive to do, not too much, but it is if you're targeting, for example, mobile phones. So in those cases, we have this sphere, which basically captures any objects colliding with these spheres. We've tested this. It sounds like it wouldn't work very precisely, but trust me, it looks really good. I mean, really good. And these events from here that you can hook up to any particle effects you want. For example, if you want to a flaming sword, you want to make it explode every time it collides with an enemy, there's an event here called event attack activation, and you just click this plus button here and drop in the particle effects and set it active or whatever. At the moment I have this trail component here, which is this one from here, which is generating the trails of the sword. These trails are calculated using a spline algorithm called catmull-rom, and I messed it up. This whole script should have been included here, and this shouldn't be exposed to you because it's basically the same. So for example, the segment has 2 points here, one here and one here, and the trail has 2 points also, which is this one from here and this one from here, and as you can see, they are the same position. So this is going to disappear. It will be done automatically and completely transparent to you, and you will get sword trails without any hassle. So just forget about this. It's going to be much better. Not much better, but easier to configure. And that's all for the blade component. This component can be at the root of the object or any object deep inside this prefab, but it must be in this object, in the blade object. Quick pause to see the chat. Okay, sound events with hits. That's a very good question, and it will be addressed when we go. Oh, it's now. So, as we saw that the weapon has some sound effects here. This sound effect is played every time you swing the sword or you impact something with this sword. However, hitting, for example, wood doesn't sound the same as hitting flesh, obviously. So to solve this, each of these animation clips from here allows to play a different audio clip based on the type of attack. So for example, and now it's time to see these objects, which are called the animation clips, which I told you before to think about them as animations. But they are much more than animations, and to be honest, are one of the coolest parts of the melee module. So for example, this my attack 1 is part of the first attack when you make a basic combo. So you have the animation section, you have this animation clip, which is, I'll select it now here, and I think you can see it here. It's this attack from here. Okay. Oh, by the way, I created all the animations using UMotion. This package is great. So going back to the attack one, you drop your animation clip here. If you want to mask parts of the body, you can do it here. Transition in and transition out are the transition time between the animation clip starts playing and fades into the next clip. So for example, if you start swinging your sword, it will interpolate between the locomotion state and the start of the slash. These values usually go between 0.1 and 0.3. I wouldn't go around the second because that's too much, and we will eat part of the strength of the animation. Motion. This is one of my favorite parts. So, as some of you know, a game creator doesn't support root motion. However, we created these curves from here, which are a bit daunting to see, that control how the player moves during this attack. So in this case, for example, the movement forward, which is the local forward movement of the character when doing this slash attack, it goes down a bit and then goes up forward. These one are the sides, so how it moves around the sides, excuse me, and the vertical movement, which is usually very flat. However, this sorry a second, just let me drink some water. This button from here, which is called Extract Root Motion, it will only be available if you have an animation clip here. So for example, if you don't have any, this button is gray out, and I think it was called Combo 1. Yes. So if you have this, you click Extract Root Motion, and it will extract all the root motion from this animation clip and paste it onto this animation curves, which allow you to move the character when performing this attack without root motion, although it simulates the root motion from the animation clip, which you get the benefits from both worlds, from root motion authored animations and non-root motion authored animations, which is great. You also have this movement multiplier. This is basically scales these values from here. So you usually want it to set to 1, which is basically these values from here. For example, the block counter, which is the animation when you block, you perfectly block a attack and you counter attack. This counter attack, it's this animation clip from here. I scaled it to 1.5 right before starting the live stream because the animation seemed a bit bland, so I pumped it 50% more, and it just looked perfect. It's like a last minute resource to fiddle around. So going back with this, you have also a gravity influence. This is better if I show you. So let me go to this scene from here, and let's go back to this attack. Okay, so I sheath my sword, and if I attack, I simply attack. Okay, so gravity influence is set to 1. So if I jump, attack, it plays this animation. Let me quickly change this. Let's go to here. In the combo system, I will remove this one from here, and it should play this animation clip now. Let's see it. So if I press space to jump and attack, it plays that animation exactly. As you can see, the player, while performing the attack, it falls down. However, my attack here, if I reduce the gravity influence, and I press jump and attack, the player stays in the air while performing the attack, and then it falls. This is especially useful if you want to make attacks like slashing an enemy upwards and then following an aerial attack. You can reduce the gravity influence to something like 0 or 0.5, and the player will be staying airborne. This is especially seen in games like Kingdom Hearts and those more aerobatic gameplay mechanics, or Devil May Cry, for example. So, effects, like always. Sound effect. Someone was asking before how to make different sound effects. It's here. You have the slash, which is the default attack, but as you can see here, if I see my weapon, the normal attack sounds like this. And if I make, for example, a special attack, no, sorry, it sounds different. That's because this sound effect from here is another audio clip. You can see it from here, Stinger. It's an audio clip called Stinger. And push force is basically if while you perform a slash or any attack, there's a rigid body, it will push it with this force towards the direction the player is facing. And another of my favorite parts is this one from here, hit pause. If no one knows what hit pause is a way of cheating the player into thinking that their attacks are more powerful. This is better explained with an example. So, for example, the default attack now has no hit pause. It's disabled. So, if I attack the enemy, it just attacks him there's some particle effects and so on. However, I can toggle it and say I want a hit pause amount of 0.05. Almost, it will almost freeze the time, and a duration of 0.1 seconds. Now let's see what this does. As you can see, there's a small freeze frame when the attack connects. You can pump this effect to something like this, or even 1 second. And it looks like the game is like freezing because the freeze frame is the amount of freeze is like 0, but with something like this looks much better. This is especially useful for attacks like special ones like this one, as you see the freeze frame here. And it's like this. It's like just a checkbox, and you get a powerful attack out of nothing. It was 0.05, and this one was around 0.1, I believe, and it was disabled. So whatever. Combat. This is the meat of the melee module. So I'll make a quick pause and see the chat if there are any questions. Okay, no questions. Perfect. Okay, getting back to here. This is my favorite part. So, let's first think about this if it's not an attack. So there is this option here which is called is attack. If I disable this, I get a bunch of options removed. Let's just focus on this if it wasn't an attack, and we'll review these options first. So you have a clip can be interruptible, vulnerable, and has a posture drop down. Interruptible means that while this animation clip is being played, another enemy attack can interrupt this current animation clip. So for example, most animation clips will be interruptible, But if a boss, for example, is charging his attack, and you can get, for example, like 3 seconds of free hits, or you can back down to before the boss releases his super attack. If you set the boss as interruptible, any attack that the player does onto him will interrupt his charge attack, and you don't usually want that. You want bosses to resist all incoming attack from the player to make them feel like they are in control. So this charge attack could be set as uninterruptible, but all other clips will most likely be interruptible. Vulnerability, the name explains what this is. It can be during this animation clip, the player will be vulnerable or invincible. There isn't much to talk about this. The difference, because there's a quirk here. If you are the difference between being invincible and uninterruptible is that if you are uninterruptible, you can still get hit, although you won't have any reaction to those hits. However, if you are invulnerable, or invincible, sorry, you won't get any reactions hits because you won't get any hits. Hope that makes sense. So let's this map. And posture. The default posture is steady, and you can have it as stagger. Stagger is basically when you when the player gets attacked, it backs down a bit. This reaction is usually set as a staggered, and while the animation clip is being played as a stagger, it means that it cannot play any attacks while this animation is being played, because the player is stumbling. Maybe stumble should be a better word, but whatever. And that's it. However, if this animation clip is an attack, you have a bunch of new options here. You have this part from here and this one from here. Let's start by here. If you said if this animation clip is an attack, you can define if it's blockable or not. If you set it as not blockable, if you hit an enemy that is blocking this attack, you will still hit him. It will break his defense. Defense damage is how much defense this attack subtracts from the opponent, and the same with poise. You have these two separate properties here. And this part from here, this is my favorite part by a mile. So this is the scrub timeline. It can only be seen if you have an animation clip here, and it goes from 0 to, and you have the time here, to 1 second, but 1 second is because this animation clip lasts for 1 second. If this animation clip has a duration of 1.5 seconds, for example, you will have here 1.5 seconds. And the animation clip is divided in 3 phases. The anticipation, which is the blue one, you have here the name, the green one, which is the activation, and this is the recovery. And those who are animators will see this very familiar term, which was invented by Disney. And basically, you have an animation, you have the anticipation, the activation, and the recovery, which are the 3 phases when you perform a movement. For example, when you throw a punch, you load your punch backwards, then you activate it, which are the frames where the punch can connect with enemies, and because of this momentum, you have the character has to recover from all this strength put on his punch. So it has to recover from the force that the punch throw. So to define these frames, you have these handles from here, which you can move around and play around. To make things easier, you have this drop down here, where it says drop a scene character here. For example, the player, I can drop it here. And if I move this around, here's the player. I can scrub this and see the animation live playing in the scene view, which is awesome because I can see when the attack should start being considered an attack, which is around here, for example, when his hand is starting to move forward. The attack connects here, and around here should be the end of the attack, and this is the recovery phase. As you can see, the strength of the slash is being decreased, and the character should turn back to the idle pose. So anticipation, start attacking, and recovery. And you have here some nice values, like the amount of frames that each phase occupies. And yeah, that's it. That's actually it. Let me check for any questions. Yeah, live scrubbing is it took me a while to implement this, but I really wanted it. Suggestions on hand-to-hand combat and animal combat. Hand-to-hand combat is the same as sword slashing, because the only difference between swinging a sword or throwing a punch is the animation, and you will probably won't have any model, or maybe you have some kind of glove or nothing. You can create an empty object with a blade component and register hits there. As for animals, all you have to do is in the, let me see, weapons. In the weapons, when you set the weapon model, because an animal doesn't have a right hand or right foot or whatever, you have to set it as root. The root is the game object itself. So for example, if you have a bear and you want him to attack with his mouths, you want to create the hit detector in front of his mouth, and that's it, basically. Okay, so let me see the notes. Yeah, something I forgot. As I said, this is not yet complete, and someone asked on Twitter how I could implement this with integrate this with this stats module. It's going to be really easy. The problem is that it's not yet ready. In these melee clips, you will have here an actions list, and every time this specific clip attacks a specific character, you will have an action here that you can deal damage to that character. You will just have to set as the invoker, which is going to be the opponent, the object that has collided with has received the attack, sorry, and that's it. So we have an actions here. What else? Okay, that's it. Actually, that's it. And just to wrap things up, I will make a quick summary. So when you create the melee module, you just have to take into account you have characters. These characters need to have a character melee component, and this character melee component needs to have a weapon and a shield. And also remember that a shield doesn't need to have a physical shield. So for example, if you have the player wielding a katana and you don't have any shield wielding a katana, the shield can represent the blade itself. So the shield object, in this case, for example, you don't have any prefab here because the shield itself is the blade. In case you want to have a representation of the shield, you can perfectly drop here a game object and it will appear in the left hand or whatever. For example, here I can set into his left hand and pick here a shield object. But if not, it's perfectly fine to have this as an optional field. So you have the weapon object, the shield object, and each weapon object, yes, has a combo system, and this combo system is composed of different melee clips. And of course, to create these melee clips, you just have to right click, create, should be here, game creator, and you have melee weapons, melee shields, and melee clips. You have melee clip, for example, and I would say this, my super attack. And that's it. You just drop here your animations, avatar mask, transitions, set the motions, your effects, the combat properties, and you're done. So to demonstrate this, let's see how it can work with behavior. Really easy. You see this, let's see, this is the combat solo. No, I want the other scene, the combat enemy. The enemy AI is driven by these actions from here, which waits a second, attack, makes the enemy attack, waits 2 seconds, makes the enemy attack. So you can plug this into the behavior module, and in another node just check if the player, for example, is inside. If it's inside, check the distance between the player and the enemy. If the distance is closer than, I don't know, 1 unit, you can play this and these attacks from here, or you can check, for example, if the enemy has enough stamina, and if the enemy has enough stamina, it can throw some special attacks. Special attacks can be done using, for example, instead of the key A, it can be a key B, for example, and it's the complexity of the system. It's completely up to you, but it's really easy to use. So what I want you to take out of this is that you can make a enemy, how to say it, you can issue commands to attack the player constantly every frame, and the enemy will only attack the enemy when it's ready to attack. How it will work with stats like stamina. So every time, for example, the player here, you have the input A on player. So instead of binding the left click directly into the melee here, you would, let's do it. You would have here a conditions. Let's do it here. So I will remove this from here. Now I'll create another one like this. Okay, so I'll create a new trigger, and I'll call the, oops, sorry, this is not a Mac. I'll call this trigger attack, and it's going to be on left, oops, on mouse down, left, and it will call a conditions, and these conditions will simply check, it's going to call enough stamina, and we'll check the stamina on the player. If you have the stats module, I don't have it here, but if you have it, you can just check if the attribute stamina is higher than, for example, 1. In this case, we'll use just a local variable number, and if the local variable, we'll create it here, local variable stamina, it's going to be a number and starts at 100. And we'll check if this local variable from here is greater than 10, and if it is, we'll call an actions, and it's going to be melee, and the icons are still pending to be done, and it's input melee attack, this one, and we'll issue the command on the player as the key A. So let's test this. Oh, sorry, I have to remove the other one. Player attack, this one. I'll just remove this, so it only will work this one. So now I can attack. I can attack because I have enough stamina here, because my stamina is 100, and it's comparing it to 10. However, if my stamina is depleted, it's 0. I can't attack because I don't have enough stamina. So what's left to do is basically have a cooldown here and make the stamina increase over time. This is easier with the stats module, but you can do it with local variables if you don't have the stats module. I mean, the combo is kind of the problem. Yeah, that's right. We can discuss this in Discord because NECA had another issue with unlocking different skills, and maybe I could create a trigger that every time you attempt to execute a special melee clip, you could decide whether to play it or not based on some conditions. So in both cases, we could create something that works for this. Okay, so just to wrap things up, as I explained, you have the weapons, you have the shield, and you have melee clips. So now I wanted to do some live demonstration about how to create a custom melee clip. I downloaded some animations from here and I will pick one that I like. Let's see, Dax, and let's see, what's this? This seems pretty cool. There was one that I saw that it was super cool. This one, it's like a back trick, and we can use this one to implement the for example, a special attack. So it's called attack move slow back trick, which is here. Okay, so I will create another melee clip. So no, let's start from the beginning. So here in the demo weapon, I have my combo system. I want to create another entry. Oops, sorry, this one, this button, which is going to be the B key. And I'm going to bind the B key. Scheiße. Let me quickly remove this. I will create an action here and it's going to issue melee attack. And instead of issuing an A attack, it's going to issue a B attack. And this B attack is going to be this one from here. There's going to be no condition. I want it to play as soon as I press the B attack, and it's going to play the melee clip that I'm going to create right now, right here. Create, game creator, melee clip, and it's going to be called back trick, like this. And I'm going to add it here. Yes. So the animation that's going to be played, it's called back trick, this one, the first one, I believe. Yes, this one. I can drop the player here just to see how the, oh, I don't know which one is this one. And it's going to play this animation from here. So I don't want any avatar mask. The transition is too high, something like .1. The motion, I'm going to simply press the extract with motion, and it's going to extract all these micro steps the player does when performing the attack. The effects, I'm going to play an audio. It's going to be called backslash. Yeah, like the special attack from before. Push force of 50, okay, and it's going to have a hit pause of, yeah, like this. Sounds good to me. It's an attack, it's blockable, the defense damage is 1, poise damage is 2, yeah, why not? It's interruptible, it's going to be vulnerable, and it's steady. Yeah, perfect. let's hit play. I unsheath my weapon, focus on this, and the attack, it does this attack. However, it looks like it's not hitting the enemy. And as you can see, the enemy does the same attack because this weapon is shared between the two of us. So just modifying one weapon can influence any other characters using the same weapon. And the reason why this attack is not connecting, yeah, it's because this crap, I didn't set this crap correctly. So here the player, I set it to anticipation to this, but I want the activation because the sword is here and the attack is going to connect only until the sword is here, which is not enough. So I want the attack to connect up until something like this, like this, yes. And this is the recovery frames. Let's check it. Yeah. So that's it. It's super fun to use this one. You just drop in the characters. I can't stress how important it is to allow to iterate, because once you are in production making a game, then oh man, this enemy is taking like 3 frames to perform an attack, and your character is like 4 frames, then you have to adjust. Just come here, modify it a bit, and then you got it. Balancing the game is super easy and super fun to do, and you don't have to go to JSONs or scriptable objects. Just here, just modifying it, and that's it. So let's check the chat. The animations clips, yes, some of the Big Samo ones have root motions. However, all the attacks animations have been done by me with using how is that called, U-motion. However, the coolest looking ones, like this back trick and the character locomotion while wielding the weapon, are from Cobalt, which, yeah, it's from the asset store. You can purchase it there. However, in Game Creator, the melee module, sorry, is going to come with a set of animations that you can play with. They are not super good, but they are okay-ish. So, if there are no more questions, I think I'm going to prepare dinner and get ready to write some documentation of the melee module for tomorrow. Yeah, I think, yeah, no more questions. Okay, so thank you everyone for tuning in. I hope to do these videos more often. They are fun, they are easy to do, and you know, you're a good community, guys. Thank you very much for tuning in. I'll see you next time. Bye.